What's up, everybody? So today we're gonna tie a little crab fly that has worked really well for me in the past for sight fish and redfish. I'm sure it would have other applications in different parts of the country, but it's a fly that's always in my box, and it's always good to have variation in your fly box just on days when they just want to eat one thing. So let's get into it. All right. I'm gonna tie a little crab. We're gonna start with size 2 Umpqua jig hook, and we're gonna stick with an orange theme for this fly. So we're gonna be using orange 210 thread. Start getting that worked on there. Cut off this excess here. I need to grab some eyes. Going to use, if I can get one, some medium eyes. Figure 8s on this, and then end it with some parachute wraps. Getting really nice and locked in there. And then this fly is going to have a hot spot, so we're going to work our thread here a little bit past the bend of the hook. Right to about there. We got some orange, some hot orange cactus chenille that I'm going to put on there. Cut off about 3 inches or so. Don't need a ton. Get that locked on there. Work my thread back forward. And I'll start palmering this on. This out of the way a little more. With this, I just try and form a little ball if you can. You can kind of wrap it on top of itself, but you want to take it a little forward as well. Just until, I like to stop it right before or right at when that hook starts to level out. Get one more wrap in there. Looks good. Work my thread back, get that locked in. That looks good. Snip off that excess and just work your thread back over it just a little bit. Try and keep those fibers going in the same direction. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to grab some polar fiber, which I generally like to use more than I use craft fur, just because it's a little bit easier to work with, and I feel like you get a little more bang for your buck. As far as like craft fur, you end up having to take out a ton of under fluff, and with the polar fiber, it's not near as bad. So go ahead, get this locked in. Looks pretty good. Grab my good pair of scissors and snip off that excess. And we'll just clean this up a little bit, make sure it doesn't go anywhere. That looks good. And then before I do anything else, I'm gonna grab my orange Sharpie and put a little barring on this polar fiber. We're gonna try and fit 3 bars in there. good. Next, I'm gonna grab some silly legs, and these are in pumpkin and black color. And grab 2 strands. These are gonna imitate claws when we're done. So I'm gonna split those 2 strands around my thread. I'm gonna work this back up. And once I get pretty close to where I'm gonna stop wrapping, I'm gonna split them to try and get 2 strands on either side of the fly. Try not to wrap too tight so they don't kind of flare out. Let's see, that looks good right about there. Perfect. Next step, got some crustacean eyes we're gonna put on there. You can make these, I think I've talked about it before, just by burning some pieces of 30 or 40 pound mono, and then dunking the burned end into some UV resin. But I generally buy mine. I get mine off like Amazon or from a fly shop just because they turn out a lot better than the ones that I try and make. Although if you're just going for black eyes, then making them yourself is definitely probably the way to go, just because it's fairly easy. But so when I tie these on, I'm going to try and angle them down. So you get these nice and locked in. And then once I have that locked in, I'm going to start working my thread on the other side of the eye to lock it in really well, because if anything falls off in this fly when it gets eaten, it's generally these eyes. But I'll wrap the thread on either side of it. 1 to make sure it doesn't move, and 2 to kind of push these eyes out a little bit. Looks pretty good. Go ahead and snip this. And we'll tie our other one on. The fly itself is pretty easy. Tying the eyes on is always probably the trickiest part, in my opinion. Just trying to get them even, making sure they're not pushed in too much. And see, that looks pretty even, so I'll start working my thread on the outside of it. Yeah, I can flip my vise a little bit to show you what I'm doing here. So I'll pull the eye up, go underneath it to really try and push that eye out slightly. Slightly uneven, maybe I can pull that one in just a little bit. There we go. Go ahead and clip off this mono right here. Work my thread back. And then we'll get the last material, which is a crustacean brush. This is a really good brush for if you're trying to tie crab bodies, and it works really well. It just takes some pretty serious trimming. So you'll see once we get this palmered on here, it'll look like one of those Pomeranian dogs with the crazy fluffy fur. But once we trim it up, it'll look decently like a crab. So as always, just trying to keep these fibers pushing back. We'll definitely have to pick this out because it's impossible to not trap fibers with this brush. Then we will grab our brush, try and get our thread split in between some of these hairs with fibers. Then we'll lock that in there in front of the eyes. We'll go back and clean this up with the lighter as well as some thread. And grab your scissors that you don't care about again. Try not to cut your thread and clip that brush off. And I'm just going to go back over this with some thread, some really tight wraps. Just make sure that brush isn't going to go anywhere, as well as kind of hide a lot of those trapped fibers up there. Perfect. And then lastly, if you wanted to tie on a weed guard, now would be the time. I'm not going to put one on this one. So we'll just go ahead and whip finish this. Cut our thread. Then we'll grab our bodkin and we'll make this look like a Pomeranian. So we're just going to slowly turn our vise and just pick this out. It's going to look like it has an afro. Furs up in the front. All right, that looks pretty good. Fly's done. Just kidding. So now that it's all picked out, this is when the trimming comes into play. Usually I would take this out of the vise to trim it, but just for purposes of trying to teach how to do this, I'll try my best to do it in the vise. But essentially you just go straight over the top and give it a nice haircut. This is a kind of a feel it out process. So you go over the top, make it as flat as you can. Good. And then do the same thing on the bottom. Really try not to cut off those crustacean eyes that we put on. One side that's a little bit thicker than the other. So I'm going to try and trim this up just a bit. There you go. And then on the sides, I just like to angle my scissors up and then just work them back down. Trying to give it that crab shell kind of form, if you will. Still sticking out pretty far, so I'm going to take that down a little bit more. Just hoping I kind of clean this stuff up. Make sure it looks fairly even on either side. That looks pretty good. And lastly, this is definitely an optional thing you can do, but I'll take these silly legs and tie a knot in them. And that's really just to try and make it look a little bit more like crab claw. Definitely some tedious parts of this fly, but once you get it, it's not too bad. The hardest part, in my opinion, is trimming that crustacean brush to the shape that you want it. And we'll grab our lighter, clean up some of these fibers on the front, make sure we don't burn any of the ones that we won't. Hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of the shape that you're looking for. Not like this. And then we'll go ahead and use some thin UV resin. Make sure none of this goes anywhere. A little bit in between the eyes. Roll it around so it kind of evens out. Give it a quick zap. Give this crab body one more look. See a couple things I clean up. And that's it. It's good, nice, easy crab fly that you can throw at redfish. I'm sure other species would eat it, but here in North Carolina, this is what we throw it for mostly. It's redfish. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Tie some up. Let me know how you do, and if you have any questions or comments, or just want to reach out to me about ideas on other flies to tie, what have you, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm pretty responsive on any questions that come through. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and have a good rest of your day.